The myth of Persephone is a cornerstone of Greek mythology, emblematic of the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Persephone, the daughter of Demeter, goddess of the harvest, was abducted by Hades, ruler of the underworld. The pivotal moment comes when Persephone eats pomegranate seeds, binding her to the underworld for part of the year, thereby initiating the cycle of seasons. Her absence marks winter, and her return signifies the rebirth of spring. This myth is not just an ancient tale, but a profound metaphor for the balance of life and the inevitability of change. In the context of what if Persephone never ate the pomegranate, this myth's significance extends to an exploration of ecological and existential balance. If Persephone were to return to Earth permanently, the eternal spring would disrupt the natural order, leading to unintended consequences like soil exhaustion due to non-stop cultivation. This challenges the notion that perpetual growth is inherently positive, highlighting the necessity for nature's cycles. A real-world reflection of this concept is seen in modern agricultural practices. Continuous monoculture farming, akin to an eternal spring, depletes soil nutrients, demonstrating the importance of seasonal cycles and crop rotation for sustainability. Similarly, the myth echoes in the psychological sphere, illustrating that constant happiness and avoidance of hardships might hinder personal growth and resilience. Life's challenges, akin to winter, foster strength and evolution. Opinions supporting the myth's core idea argue that death and rebirth are vital, not just ecologically, but morally and spiritually. They emphasize that acknowledging life's transience can enrich our appreciation for its moments. However, challenges to this viewpoint include differing cultural interpretations of death, such as those seen in Eastern philosophies, where cycles of rebirth hold unique meanings. In terms of controversy, there's the argument that humanity's aversion to death and struggle fuels innovation and progress, suggesting that a static, perpetually harmonious existence might lead to stagnation. Yet, the myth underscores how harmony itself depends on contrast. If Persephone's narrative were altered, the lack of death would undermine Hades' domain, reflecting how even less favored elements of life contribute to universal equilibrium. This myth is a microcosm of how interdependent cycles support life. It emphasizes that disruption in one domain, like Persephone's eternal return, has a domino effect, influencing agriculture, mortality, and human nature. Thus, Persephone's myth remains a powerful reminder of the delicate harmony that sustains our world. The idea of Persephone never eating the pomegranate, and thus remaining on Earth forever, introduces a profound alteration to the mythical cycle of seasonal change. In this scenario, because Persephone does not form a bond with the underworld, the balance between life and death is disrupted, resulting in an eternal spring where the Earth's dynamics shift dramatically. This endless season seems idyllic at first, suggesting a world of perpetual growth and abundance. However, this absence of seasonal change leads to soil exhaustion due to continuous crop production, thereby creating the paradox of abundance, turning into widespread famine. Consequently, the eternal life this scenario promises becomes unsustainable and ultimately detrimental. The significance of this concept is immense, as it serves as a metaphor for the necessity of cyclical balance in nature and life. Without the death and rebirth inherent in changing seasons, the ecosystem cannot sustain itself, illustrating that death is an integral part of life. Two real-world examples highlight this point. First, agricultural practices depend on crop rotation and fallow periods to maintain soil health, emphasizing how constant growth without rest depletes resources. Second, the concept echoes in discussions about the importance of work-life balance, where continuous activity without rest leads to burnout and inefficiency. Supporters of this viewpoint argue that life's rhythm, marked by growth, death, and rebirth, is essential for sustainability. They contend that nature's cycles foster resilience and renewal, a view supported by ecological studies demonstrating the necessity of biodiversity and environmental balance. However, challenges to this perspective arise in myths or ideologies praising eternal abundance and prosperity. Some might argue that technology and innovation could counteract natural limitations, though history suggests such efforts often lead to unforeseen consequences. This permanent state of spring influences other aspects of the scenario by affecting the roles and purposes of mythical figures. Hades, deprived of his role, embodies the danger of excluding death from the life cycle. Demeter's unchecked joy, as the eternal spring goddess, ironically leads to ecological imbalance, emphasizing that unchecked positivity can have negative ramifications. Overall, this narrative underlines the interconnectedness of life and death, challenging the notion of paradise by revealing that even utopias require the harsh element of mortality to retain their harmony and sustenance. Eternal Spring, the consequence of Persephone's continuous presence on Earth, explores a pivotal alteration in the mythological narrative where Persephone never consumes the fateful pomegranate seeds, thus avoiding her cyclical descent and ascent between the Earth and the underworld. This hypothetical scenario suggests a world plunged into perpetual spring as Demeter, the goddess of harvest and mother to Persephone, ceaselessly imbues the earth with life-giving energy. On the surface, this eternal spring might seem idyllic, but it comes with profound consequences, illustrating the intrinsic need for balance in nature. The significance of this concept lies in its exploration of natural cycles and the importance of balance between life and death, growth and rest. Without Persephone's seasonal return to Hades, the rhythm of the natural world is disrupted, leading to an imbalance with far-reaching consequences. Continuous growth would exhaust the soil, making it infertile over time, thereby sowing the seeds for eventual famine despite the constant spring. This paradox highlights the critical lessons about ecological and life cycles, emphasizing that without periods of dormancy, the cycle of renewal is incomplete. Real-world parallels can be drawn from agricultural practices, such as crop rotation and the inclusion of fallow periods, which allow fields to recover and maintain fertility. Similarly, the example of forest ecosystems shows the necessity of natural disturbances like fires for promoting biodiversity and renewal. These examples underscore the idea that constant productivity without rest leads to degradation. Support for the idea that balance is essential can be found in ecological science, which warns against overexploitation of resources without allowing time for recovery. Prominent figures in environmental conservation often argue for sustainable practices that mirror nature's cycles of life and death. Challenges to this concept might include viewpoints that emphasize the potential for technology to mitigate the impacts of continuous growth. Some may argue that technological advancements in agriculture and environmental management could maintain productivity without natural rest periods. However, these methods often fail to replicate the full complexity of natural systems. Eternal spring affects the broader narrative of life and death, where even mythical characters like Hades face existential crises without their roles in maintaining balance. Through this lens, the longing for a paradise where time stands still is portrayed as a cautionary tale about the dangers of disrupting natural rhythms. The interconnectedness of all life forms, coupled with the necessity of cycles, becomes crystal clear, showing that paradise isn't defined by eternal abundance, but by harmony and renewal. In this alternate mythological narrative, where Persephone never consumes the pomegranate and thus eternally resides on Earth, we encounter a profound shift with far-reaching consequences. The eternal spring that unfolds signifies a perpetual state of growth and abundance, initially seeming utopian. However, this breaks the inherent cycles of nature, which rely on balance and transition between life and death. The perpetuation of a single season highlights the necessity of change for both environmental equilibrium and existential meaning. This concept is significant as it challenges the notion that an unending abundance equates to paradise. The absence of seasonal cycles upsets the natural order, leading to soil degradation and famine due to overproduction. This mirrors the real-world agricultural issue of monoculture, where continuous cultivation of a single crop depletes soil nutrients, resulting in decreased fertility and increased reliance on artificial fertilizers. These cycles of growth and decay are crucial for nutrient replenishment and ecosystem health. Another example comes from the broader concept of sustainability. Just as the Earth's resources must regenerate to maintain balance, so too must the cycle of life and death, which ensures biodiversity and ecological stability. The disruption seen in this mythological scenario echoes contemporary concerns about climate change and the human impact on natural cycles. If resources are exploited beyond their capacity for renewal, systems inevitably collapse under the weight of unchecked abundance. Support for this idea comes from ecological and philosophical insights, suggesting that death and renewal are pivotal for maintaining life's dynamism. Philosophers like Heraclitus have argued that change is the fundamental essence of the universe, and without it, stagnation ensues. Nevertheless, this narrative invites alternative viewpoints. Some might argue for the benefits of technological advancements as a modern path to achieving resource abundance without ecological harm, yet such progress still faces foundational limitations. Persephone's absence from the underworld symbolically strips Hades of his purpose, illustrating the interdependence between life and death. This disruption cascades into other aspects of existence, such as the soul's resisting mortality, showing how imbalance in one realm can instigate disorder across many others. Demeter's excessive rejoicing that halts nature's rest underscores how even joyous conditions require their own cessation to preserve harmony. In essence, a monoseasonal world exemplifies how the cessation of cyclical change would precipitate existential and ecological crises, emphasizing that paradise is sustainable only when it encompasses the full spectrum of life, death, and rebirth.